Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. Today, another tabletop hands-on review, and we are looking at a watch from Stowa. And no, it's not a flieger. As you guys know, I featured a Stowa flieger a long time ago from a very legendary German brand. This, of course, is made in Germany in the Black Forest, but we're going to be discussing one of their divers today. So yeah, a very different watch, very contemporary, remarkably different from their fliegers. But before we get into that, I really should do a wristwatch check, and I'm wearing my official cosmonaut chronograph. This is the 38mm size. I have still yet to review this particular piece. I absolutely adore it. I love Fortis. Very significant brand with an incredible history, plus 100 years independent. And I'm wearing it on my Lucky Zulu. I just think that tooltastic look and aesthetic just matches a olive one piece perfectly. So I've yet to review this. I will do it when I'm back in New York, because I have the Descendant, because this is actually from the late 90s, I think. So I'm waiting to get back to New York. That way I can compare it with the modern equivalent. So anyway, wristwatch check done. Let's get back to the review at hand. A little bit of history, I think, before we dive into the actual sorry, pardon the terrible pun, but before we get on with the actual review. So Stowa were founded in 1927. Their headquarters is in Engelsbrand, Germany, and I apologize if I've butchered that. It was founded by Walter Storz. Currently is under the leadership of Mr. Schauer. Now, I had the privilege of meeting this year at a watch event in New York City. It was a great honor to meet the man himself. And obviously to see some of these incredible timepieces firsthand. Now, I've mentioned the brand in a whole host of videos, including my top 5 German brands you should know about. I've got to do another follow-up video to that, bearing in mind in Germany there are, I think, about 180 to 200 brands, watch brands. So I barely scratched the surface, and Germany really is not so much forgotten. I mean, obviously, connoisseurs, enthusiasts, they know about the wonders of German watchmaking. Germany was a powerhouse and very significant to the history and evolution of the wristwatch and horology in general, especially in the medieval era and beyond. But they certainly get kind of overshadowed by the Swiss and the Japanese to a certain extent these days. You guys know I'm a big fan of German watch brands, and Stowa has always been held in high regard, especially by me and a lot of fellow gentry. Now, Stowa's most iconic watches, undoubtedly the Fliegers. They were one of 5 companies tasked with making the pilots' watches during the war. The others being Lange, IWC, Laco, and of course Wempe. So this was in 1939, and these were massive, 55mm pieces. I did review their modern Descendant, I think 1 or 2 years ago now, in one of my early reviews. Certainly basic by today's standard, but and I'm talking about the review, not the watch. I mean, the watch is amazing. I was hugely impressed by it. So their heritage is there, but they also have the iconic Bauhaus inspired watches from slightly earlier. Antia or Anti line is based on, I'm not quite sure on the pronunciation of that, beautifully clean, very, very typical Germanic Bauhaus minimalist aesthetic. Their balance of functionality and cleanliness and quality is in everything they do. Then, of course, they have their Partito line, their marine chronometers, which they were quite famous for doing, also around about the same period, in the 30s and 40s. But a little bit later on, in 1963, Stowa released their first Seatime, which is what today's watch is based on. So their history of making dive watches goes back half a century, and that certainly is quite rare in the German brands. Now, the Seatime was re-released, I believe, in 2005, Ever since then, it's kind of evolved into several different forms. There are two main types. There's the Seatime, which we're looking at today, and then there is the Pro Diver. Now, the Pro Diver, basically the souped up version of the watch. It has an added helium escape valve. It has a high water resistance of, I think, about 1,000 meters. It does not have the display back that the Seatime has. The Seatime is a 200-meter dive watch. It's also more affordable. And this highlights a great point that we should mention. Part of Stowa's innovative history is in as early as 2001, they started selling without any middleman on their own website. And it is a fantastic service. In a way, they're really leading or led the way watches should be sold with their online boutique. You can specify to have all kinds of customization done to your watch, from signed rotors to different strap combinations, even a whole host of variety of dials and hands. But not only that, they decorate the movements beautifully, and there's a wonderful attention to detail, and they can achieve this at an affordable, competitive price because you're buying it direct from the factory. So it really has to be mentioned, this, and I think it's a wonderful way to do it, and because at the end of the day, the consumer gets so much more. They are, 90 years old now, almost 100 years of lineage and history to their name, which we barely touched on today. I mean, we could do a whole episode on their history. So it really is an impressive aspect to a company that, yes, they do traditional watches, but their way of marketing and selling is very, very 21st century. So definitely worth mentioning. So let's have a look at the Seatime in closer detail. Now, the version we have today, this is called the Seatime Black, and it is entirely in titanium. So it's got that really dark gunmetal color to it. It's a very substantial piece, I must admit. We'll get the dimensions out of the way first. So the diameter is 42 millimeters. So the height is about 14 millimeters. Lug to lug, we're looking at 50 millimeters. And then lug width is 22. So a very contemporary size, and obviously bigger than the 1963 originals, but they've maintained a lot of the aesthetics. However, they've updated it beautifully, I think. The first thing you'll notice is just these incredible angular shapes. The way the lugs just, it looks very aggressive, but in a beautiful. Actually, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of those modern stealth warships that all the top navies in the world are now equipping themselves with. There is that extremely modernist look to it, slightly kind of sci-fi with that throwback to some of the original design elements that we see in the dial and the markings. We'll discuss that in a little while. So it's a beautiful sandblasted finish. We have, I believe it's an aluminium matte insert. I'm not 100% sure on the material of the bezel. The bezel is, of course, unidirectional. It's a 60 click. It's easily reached by the gap here. That straight. Look how straight that is for the where the rubber strap. And I must mention, this is vanilla scented with a kind of knurled, I guess a knurled pattern on the inside. I'm not sure if you could see that. Safety fold over, and then a double push button deployment there. And of course, pins where you cut the rubber to get it to the correct fit. There is a bracelet version as well. The clasp is also signed and is done in the matching finish. Now, it is worthy to point out there are micro adjustments on the buckle or deployment buckle there. Fantastic crown guards, and I love the way they angle slightly down, thus allowing your thumb and your finger there to get purchase on that crown. We do have a screw down crown, of course, and if we pull the crown out, you can see we do have a very small date at the bottom. We've got quick set, And if we pull it out all the way, it is hackable. Now this of course is an ETA based automatic, and we'll discuss the movement in just a little while. I think the crown is just the right size. Even with butler gloves on, it threads and it's easy to operate. We do get drilled lug holes, but the lugs or the spring bar is an actual screw. Now this is a little bit of a bone of contention among some fans of the watch. This, on one hand, while it is extremely secure, these are a bit of a pain to change. And it's a shame because this monochromatic one especially, I know you can get a whole variety of different colors, is very versatile when it comes to matching it with different straps, NATOs, etc. The edges of the case are done beautifully well. The construction is extremely impressive. The bezel sits just right, not enough to catch, but just enough for your finger to grip that coin edge. It screams quality. As soon as you open it, from the look of it to the feel of it, it has a reassuring feel. Somehow you just get from German watches, and if you look at it at an angle, you'll see that the bezel insert actually leans downwards, and I really love that. It's a little throwback. A lot of divers from the 60s tended to do this. We don't see that so much these days. It usually angles the other way, downwards in that way, but I love how it brings you into the dial. We have a very, very subtly domed sapphire crystal. We do have anti-reflective coating on the inside. The crown is signed with the Stowa logo there. So let's have a closer look at that dial. There's a beautiful sense of spacing of the numerals. The printing on the dial is extremely crisp, utterly perfect. The positioning of the hour markers in between the numerals. We have a sector style dial. It is matte, and then I love the way the date is cut out in a little circle. It's all very, very high contrast white. The white printing is in part superluminova. The lume on this thing is absolutely fantastic. C3 superluminova, extremely responsive and bright, frightfully easy to orientate yourself. You get that 12 at the 12 o'clock, of course. Kind of sword style hands, I would describe. Not exactly plunger, more on the sword style. Very simple seconds hand that does reach nicely to that minute track. I love how the numerals at 2, 4, 8, 10 and 12 attach themselves to that inner circle. There's a wonderful sense of symmetry, and that is also highlighted again by the 4 triangles, which the one at 12 on the bezel is also loomed up. The bezel has no numerals in it, although we do get 20-minute increments on the right side. We have the Stowa logo at the 12, and I love the way they've italicized Seatime. Just a little nod to the past. It's the only kind of more classical bit of styling in the watch. Everything else is very, very modern and bang up to date. Then we have automatic written simply, and right at the bottom we see made in Germany, which of course they really should be proud of that. Now, unlike its more expensive souped up Pro Diver brother, the Seatime does feature a display back, and if we turn the watch over, you can see that wonderful sapphire and a beautifully decorated movement. So this is the ETA 2836-2, which you know, we've discussed. Actually, let me just open that up so we can get a little bit closer. Now, we've discussed this movement many times before. Workhorse of a movement, to quote a cliche. You've got the advantage of it being affordable to maintain, very easy to service. A screw down case back. It's a 25 jewel movement. It operates at 28,800 vibrations an hour. The power reserve is about 40 hours. We get quick set hacking, as you saw earlier, and this particular version is the top grade version. So basically it's as good as it gets, really. The only thing missing is COSC certification, although I'm pleased to report the accuracy of this piece is totally within COSC. But what I love is that Stowa have spared no expense. They've decorated it. We've got that beautiful signed rotor with the Côte de Genève stripes. We have, of course, blued screws on the base plate, and and the bridges. We have pelage work. With the exception of COSC certification, this is as good as the ETA will really get. Wonderful to see it in a watch at this price range. So let's pop it on the wrist and see how it wears. So while it is far too big for me, it is at the same time quite comfortable. Because we're only talking about 100 grams in weight, obviously because it is titanium. The rubber also helps to keep the weight down. It's got a great presence, extremely legible because of that clean, high contrast dial. So as a dive watch, it performs admirably, perfectly. It's so funny because the diameter is the same as an SKX and my Squale, for example, but you know, this does wear very, very big. Anyway, let's summarize the watch. So we'll start with the positives first. Well, first of all, the quality is there. I think you're getting really excellent value for money. It's a watch that begs to be used. This is all about form and function. There really isn't that many strong contenders for the best German dive watches. I mean, the Sinn U1 is probably the best diver. However, bear in mind, Sinn started, I think it was in 61, and they obviously are famed for their pilot's watches. Stowa were making divers since 63, so their history and legacy is there, and I almost would like to say that when it goes to making the best dive watches, certainly for the longest time, Stowa really are on top. It's certainly a better value proposition in my opinion. The fact that this is just over €1,000, about 1,200 euros. So what is that? About $1,400 and upwards. Much more competitively priced than the Sinn. Also, I think we should mention with the watch, it comes in an excellent metal case with a latch. I love the aesthetic. I love these aggressive, almost brutalist lines to it. It reminds me of the South Bank in London, you know, that very kind of 60s brutalism. It's funny because the dial is a little bit more delicate with the numerals. It's not as aggressive. In terms of what it's designed to do, it does it tremendously well. And like I said, if you want to go for something a little bit more professional, they have the Pro Diver, which is incredible. I mean, that really is incredible. I think it's a wonderful update on their classics. When you look at this, you can see its ancestors without a doubt. You can see where the design came from. And the fact that it's an original design, it's not trying to be a sub, it's not trying to be a Seamaster. It's very much its own thing. And I think it gets extra brownie points for that. It really does. I also think Stowa's approach of selling these, you can order them anywhere in the world online. Their boutique is excellent. Their service is excellent. And the fact that you're not paying heaven and earth for such a high quality German made product, it's a really great deal. I can't think of a dive watch at this price range that can compete in terms of quality. The Germans just do it. They really do. Considering it's an original design, you are definitely getting bang per buck. I also think it's quite tastefully done. Yeah, the case is not going to be to everybody's taste, but it's certainly a design that's going to age well. Even this monochromatic color scheme, although quite conservative, it's going to look good for decades to come. It's a watch from a brand that is not necessarily mainstream, but certainly has a legacy that you can be proud of. And in a way, it's a great conversational piece too, because Stowa have an amazing history to them, and I don't think they get enough credit. So the negatives, well, I do think it's too big. You know I say that about a lot of watches. I would love to see this in a 38mm size. I would probably buy one myself, so maybe I'm a bit thankful or relieved. I also think it's very tool-tastic. It's very down to business. It's an unabashed tool watch. I can't pull this off formally. It's a bit too aggressive, a bit too, you know, it has that military look to it that will just not work with more formal attire, in my opinion. I mean, you can do whatever you want to do, but I wouldn't be able to wear this with a jacket, you know, going out to dinner. It doesn't have that Omega Seamaster Bond dressy appeal. That's a very difficult thing to balance. This is more on the tool watch side of things, especially aesthetically. My other negative is the bezel. That there is a little bit of play there that I feel, you know, it's at the end of the day, it's not going to terribly inhibit function. It's going to deliver, but you know, as you can see, it's a little bit on the wobbly side. You're only getting 60 clicks. I mean, some people actually prefer 60 clicks. It reminds me a little bit of actually the Seiko Samurai, although this has obviously been around far longer. It has its own distinctive look. I think it's a great alternative to the other offerings at that price range. Between this and the Pro Diver, it certainly could hold the title of the best German dive watch from $1,000 to $2,000 easily. So I've really enjoyed borrowing this watch and getting to know this watch. Stowa will always and forever be high on the list of recommended brands from Germany, especially on the, you know, entry to mid-tier kind of price range. So guys, I'm going to leave it there. Please don't forget to add your thoughts, queries, comments, opinions, all the rest of it down below, especially if you own this watch. Let me know your experiences, your thoughts. And lastly, a quick shout out to Stowa for sending this beautiful piece in. Thank you guys. So thank you very, very much for watching. Please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and found it useful. And as always guys, I will catch you in the next one. Okay, ciao.